Hello, and welcome to Learn This Game, where you can learn about board, card, and dice games and how they are played. Today, we'll be looking at Valley of the Kings Premium Edition. In this video, there will be an overview and description of the game. We'll inventory the components, and we'll review the rulebook. We'll go through gameplay, including setup, sample turns, and victory conditions. We'll conclude with some final comments and analysis to provide some further insight and recommendations. In the description, there'll be some helpful links and also a timestamp index so you can navigate directly to any part of the presentation. Valley of the Kings Premium Edition is published by AEG and was designed by Tom Cleaver. In this deck-building card game, you're an Egyptian noble trying to score the most victory points by filling your tomb with treasures. This game comes in a hefty square box measuring 11.5 inches wide by 11.5 inches tall, and it is 3.5 inches deep. It was published in 2019. The publisher link will be in the description. Valley of the Kings Premium Edition is recommended for ages 14 and older. It's considered to be low complexity, and a game should take no longer than 1 hour. It may take a little bit longer if you are playing with the full complement of 5 or 6 players. This game is designed for 1 to 6 players. It is a competitive game since you will be trying to score the most points and defeat your opponents. It is also designed for solitaire play. Despite the large terra-sized cards, this game can be played in a relatively small space, such as a regular card table. There are no boards or dice which require extra space. However, you may need a bigger table if you have 5 or 6 players. An app is not required, and there are no apps available for assistance, and there are no standalone versions. The Premium Edition is an upgraded version of the original 3 standalone games, the Valley of the Kings base game, and the subsequent games Afterlife and Last Rites. The Premium Edition includes all of the cards from these 3 games, plus additional cards unique to the Premium Edition. The cards in the Premium Edition are larger cards with updated artwork. The Premium Edition also includes 350 card sleeves. There is currently one expansion called the Necropolis expansion, which adds additional cards including artifact and pharaoh cards. If you happen to have a time machine, you may want to travel back to locate these 2 older games designed by Mr. Cleaver. If you like this game and the ancient Egyptian theme, you may enjoy these other games as well. You can search for similar games using the keywords Egyptian-themed board games, set collection, and deck-building card games. And if this game piqued your interest in ancient Egyptian history, you might want to check out these books on the subject, including The Rise and Fall of Ancient Egypt and The Egyptian Book of the Dead. Now that you've seen a brief description of the game, let's get into the game itself. This game is a solitaire or multiplayer deck-building card game that does not use dice or a board. The theme is based in ancient Egypt during the time of the Pharaohs, when Egyptian nobles used their wealth to plan for death and burial in the Valley of the Kings. Now let's see how you can win the game. Each player has a tomb tile into which they will be placing artifacts throughout the game. At the end of the game, each player will add up the points of the artifacts. The player with the most points wins the game. Only the cards in your tomb will be scored. No other cards will count. We will review how to calculate victory points during gameplay. Now let's take a look at the components. Valley of the Kings Premium Edition includes a full-color 8-page rulebook and a 16-page player's guide. There are 294 artifact cards that comprise the majority of the cards in the game. You will use these cards to purchase other cards, play actions, and for placing into your tomb. Each artifact has the following elements: the gold value for purchasing other cards, the gold cost to purchase this card, where the gem color indicates the type of card set it belongs to, and the gem shape indicates which version of the game the card belongs to. The card title, the action that you can take with this card, the historical text, the set name and the number of cards in the set, and the level, which ranges from 1 to 3. There are 6 cardboard tomb tiles to accommodate 6 players. You'll be placing artifacts under this tile to score points. There are also 6 double-sided reference cards that will show you how to set up the game and outline the turn sequence. There are 10 unique Pharaoh cards, and each has a unique ability. Pharaoh cards are optional, and all 10 are listed on the Pharaoh cards divider. There are 20 randomizer cards to assist in varying the contents of each game. There are 39 dividers to keep your cards organized. The premium edition also comes with 350 quality card sleeves. After you sleeve all of your cards, you should have some left over. There is 1 starting player token. The box insert is large enough to store all of the sleeved cards on one side, with plenty of room for expansions. Now let's take a look at the rulebook and the player's guide. The rulebook will cover the following: the game overview. It'll explain the artifact cards. It will list and explain the components. It'll show you how to win the game, how to set up the game, what each turn looks like. It provides a helpful glossary. It'll clarify some of the rules, and it will have a list of all the sets. After you read the rulebook, the player's guide will provide additional information, and it will cover the optional rules, including the use of the Pharaoh cards, card combinations. It will suggest card sets. It will also explain the 3 modes of solitaire play, and there's also a card supplement that will further explain the actions of each artifact card. Now we're going to set up the game for 2 players. After we finish looking at gameplay for 2 players, we will then complete a quick overview of the solitaire rules. The reference card will provide a guide for setting up the game, and it will also show when the game should end. First, each player gets a tomb tile and a reference card. The other side of the reference card will show the steps to take each game turn. Each player receives 10 starter cards that are listed in the rulebook. The base game start deck consists of 4 Shabti cards, 3 urns, 2 boxes of food, and 1 offering table. This will be the player's starting draw deck. After shuffling this deck, each player will draw 5 cards to comprise their starting hand. Players will later discard cards next to the draw deck. You may look at your own discard pile without rearranging the cards when it is not your turn. During your turn, however, you may only look at your discard pile if directed by an action from an artifact card. Page 8 of the rulebook will show the set list for each of the 3 versions. For this video, we will use the base game sets. We will pull these cards from the box and they will form the stock. At the bottom right of each card, there will be 1, 2, or 3 cartouches indicating the level of the card. The starter deck is full of level 1 cards. The sets just pulled from the box are level 2 and level 3 cards. To form the stock, we will shuffle the level 3 cards first and turn them face down to form the bottom of the stock. Then we will shuffle the level 2 cards and place them face down on top of the level 3 cards. We have now formed the stock. During the game, you may count the number of cards remaining in the stock without rearranging them when it is not your turn. Next, we'll construct the pyramid by drawing from the stock, going from top to bottom and left to right. Next, we'll form the boneyard, which will be the destination for sacrificed cards. We draw the top of the stock and place the card face up next to the stock to form the boneyard. You may not look at the contents of the boneyard other than the top face-up card. We will let player 1 go first, so they will receive the starting player token. The game is now set up for 2 players. Each player will have a reference card, discard pile, draw deck, and a tomb to place artifacts for scoring. Both players will be accessing the stock, boneyard, and pyramid. Now let's see how the game is played. Remember to consult the reference card to follow the steps in a turn. Player 1 will draw the first 5 cards from their draw deck. The player's hand remains hidden from all opponents. The first step in the turn is to play cards. A card can only be used in one of 3 ways per turn. The first way is to apply each card's gold value towards the purchase of a card in the bottom row of the pyramid. In this case, player 1 has a total gold value of 5, since each card in the hand has a 1 gold value. The second option is to execute the card's action. And the third is to place 1 card per turn into the player's tomb. If an action on a card allows you to put a card into your tomb, it does not count towards the limit of entombing just 1 card per turn. You may buy cards, execute actions, and entomb a card in any order you wish during your turn. Player 1 decides to place 1 card into their tomb. The urn is worth 1 victory point. The artifacts in the tomb are public knowledge and must be visible to the other players. Next, player 1 decides to purchase a card in the pyramid. Cards are bought one at a time from the base of the pyramid. You may only buy cards from among the 3 cards in the base. Cards in the middle and top rows cannot be bought until they crumble down into the base of the pyramid. You may buy any number of cards during your turn that you can afford. To buy a card, you must play cards with sufficient gold value in your hand to pay the card's cost in the pyramid. You may play multiple cards and add their gold values together to buy a single card. If you overpay, no change is given and the extra gold is lost forever. You cannot use the gold value of a card to buy more than 1 card at a time. For example, if you have a card with a gold value of 6, you cannot buy 2 cards with a cost of 3 each. So now player 1 decides to use 3 cards with a total gold value of 3 to purchase a card in the pyramid. Since player 1 now only has a total of 4 gold value in hand, only the statue of Anubis can be purchased, since the other 2 cards in the bottom of the pyramid cost 5 gold each. Once purchased, the statue of Anubis is then placed face up on the player's discard pile. The cards used for gold are not immediately placed in the discard pile, but must remain in the play area until the end of the turn. Whenever a card is removed from the pyramid, unless from the top row, the pyramid immediately crumbles. A card from the row above crumbles down to fill the space left by the removed card. So in this case, the amulet in the middle row would crumble down to the base and would now be available for purchase. This would leave an open space in the middle row, which then causes the top card to crumble down 1 level. If the middle card in the base is removed, the player can choose either of the cards in the middle row to crumble to the base. If you make no changes to the pyramid whatsoever during your turn, you must sacrifice any 1 card in the pyramid by placing it face up in the boneyard. The pyramid will crumble as normal, and you will draw a card from the stock and rebuild the pyramid. Player 1 then looks at the 1 remaining card in the hand, but cannot use it because it does not have enough gold value to purchase a card, and the action cannot be executed because there are no other cards remaining in the hand. It also cannot be placed in the tomb since another card was already placed in the tomb this turn. If you ever need clarification about the action on a card, you can consult the card supplement in the player's handbook, which provides additional explanation about the action on each card. Player 1 then proceeds to the discard step of the turn. All of the cards in play and all of the cards remaining in the hand are placed face up in the player's discard pile. The third step in the turn is to rebuild the pyramid. Starting from the base up, replace cards removed from the pyramid with cards from the stock. The final step is for player 1 to draw 5 new cards from their draw deck. Player 1's turn is now over. After drawing 5 new cards, this is how player 1's area appears after the first turn. The newly drawn cards will be used in turn 2. There is 1 card in the tomb and several cards in the discard pile. There are no cards currently in the draw deck since player 1 only started with 10 cards. The first 5 cards are now in the discard pile, and the other 5 have been drawn to be played in turn 2. After the next turn, player 1 will reshuffle all the cards in the discard pile and start a new draw deck. Now it is player 2's turn. Player 2 looks at their hand and sees 1 box of food, 3 shop teas, and 1 urn. Player 2 does not want to play any card actions, so the gold values of the cards are counted and total 5. Player 2 has several purchasing options. Recall that you can only buy cards in the base of the pyramid. They can purchase either of the cards that cost 5 gold, or they can purchase the card that only costs 4 gold and place the remaining card in the hand into the tomb. Player 2 decides to purchase the amulet for 4 gold and places it face up on their discard pile. The pyramid then crumbles due to the removal of a base card. Player 2 then places the urn card into the tomb, and it will count as 1 victory point at the end of the game. Since there are no more cards to be played, player 2 begins the discard step. The 4 cards used to purchase the pyramid card are then placed in the player's discard pile. The next step in the turn sequence is to rebuild the pyramid, which means drawing the top card of the stock and placing it at the top of the pyramid. Player 2 will then draw 5 new cards to end their turn. So this is how player 2's area now appears. Player 2 has the urn card in the tomb, and the purchased amulet is in the discard deck with the other discards. Player 2 has drawn 5 cards from their draw deck in preparation for the next turn. When player 2 eventually plays their third turn, they will need to shuffle all of the discarded cards and start a new draw deck. You can review the reference card to see that the game ends when no cards are left in the stock, no cards are left in the pyramid, and all players have taken the same number of turns. Now let's look at an example of how entombed artifacts are scored at the end of the game. In this example, these are the artifacts that player 1 and 2 have placed in their tombs by the end of the game. Let's look at player 1's tomb first and see how many victory points have been scored. First, you have to look at the bottom left of each card. There are 3 types of cards to score. Starter cards and unique cards indicate the number of victory points they're worth, so you simply have to add them together. Third type is set cards. A set is a group of similar items, such as amulets, statues, and books. To calculate their victory points, take the number of cards in the set and square them, or in other words, multiply the number by itself. So let's calculate player 1's cards first, going from right to left away from the tomb tile. The unique card is worth 3 victory points. The starter card urn is worth 1 victory point. There are 2 amulets, so 2 times 2, or 2 squared, equals 4 victory points. There are 3 statues, and 3 squared equals 9 victory points. So player 1 has a total of 17 victory points. Player 2 has a unique card worth 2 victory points. Player 2 also has 2 starter cards worth 1 point each. And player 2 has 4 book cards worth a total of 16. This gives player 2 a total of 20 victory points, which wins the game. There are 3 solitaire modes available. Not only will these allow you to play the game if you cannot find opponents, but these games will sharpen your skills in preparation for playing against other players. Consult the player's guide for details about each solitaire mode. Here is a brief summary of each mode. The first one is Starter Solitaire. In order to win, you have to obtain a perfect score, which means you have to entomb 10 starter cards, all unique cards, and 1 copy of each color set card. There is the Master Solitaire variant, which has the same rules as Starter Solitaire, except you are not allowed to entomb 1 card per turn. You therefore have to use card actions to fill up your tomb. Finally, there's a solo player variant, which uses a dummy player deck with cards that have special actions. It stimulates the behavior of a real opponent, making the game more unpredictable. The game is played with the same rules as a multiplayer game. However, the dummy player does not have a hand, and all cards taken by the dummy player are placed in the dummy player's tomb to be scored as usual at the end of the game. See the player's guide on how to set up the dummy deck and how to play the dummy player's turn. Now let's wrap up with some final comments and analysis. Valley of the Kings Premium Edition is a deluxe upgrade to the 3 prior Valley of the Kings game series. This is a fun and innovative game for people who enjoy deck building and set collecting card games. Valley of the Kings presents a twist to the standard deck building mechanic, because in addition to building a better deck, you also have to determine when to remove valuable cards from your deck to place them in your tomb for eventual scoring, which effectively removes their value and abilities from play. This is a very thematic game set in the time of the Pharaohs in ancient Egypt. All of the artwork, terminology, and objectives are consistent with the theme. The artifact cards even have historical notes about that time period. This is a great game for those who love card games that involve deck building and collecting sets. This game is designed for players who want a simple yet challenging game and who can appreciate the thematic time period. Again, the age recommendation is for players 14 and older. This is a family-friendly game. This is a very high-quality deluxe upgrade to the original games. The box is sturdy and designed to store future expansions. The cards are now much larger, so they are easier to read and play. The artwork is very well done and consistently thematic. Sturdy card sleeves are also included to protect the cards and increase their longevity. Overall, the component quality is very high, and a lot of effort went into making this a very visually attractive game. This is a relatively simple game and easy to play while still being challenging. Initially, there are a lot of cards to get used to, and it may take some time to learn how to strategically use the actions listed on the cards. But once you get used to the cards, turns are relatively fast and easy to understand. You may have to consult the card supplement in the player's book initially to fully understand how actions affect play, but the instructions are simple and easy to remember once you become familiar with them. There is some randomness since the stock and player decks are shuffled, but players do have to make strategic decisions each turn. You have to decide if you want to use each card to purchase other cards, use its action, or place it in your tomb for victory points. You have to make these decisions for each card on every turn, so there are a lot of strategic considerations you will constantly have to consider. You have to be constantly considering the balance between placing powerful cards into your tomb or keeping them in play but risking not getting them into your tomb in time before the end of the game. And there are no dice involved, so that also reduces the luck factor. If the cards are set up by their proper dividers, setup should be quick and easy and should only take a couple of minutes. However, at the end of the game, it may take a little longer to resort the cards to place them back into the box. So the breakdown will take longer than the setup. And when you first get the game, since there are over 300 cards, it may take up to 30 minutes to sort out all the cards and place them in sleeves. But once the cards are sleeved and sorted with their dividers, it should be easier to track and sort the cards. Each game should take about an hour to play depending on the number of players. 4 players can play on a regular card table, but 5 and 6 players may require a bigger playing area. This is a competitive game since you'll be trying to score more victory points than other players. There is a high degree of player interaction since you will be interacting through the same pyramid and acting and reacting to other players based on the cards they play. The possible actions you can take using cards also directly affect the cards of the other players. This is a highly replayable game. There are literally hundreds of cards in the game which allow you to vary the sets of cards for each time you play. There are even randomizer cards to help create more variations in the game. And since each artifact card has a unique action, you will always have a variety of strategic choices to make. You can also use the new Pharaoh cards to add more options to the game, and there are 3 solo versions to provide even more variation. No 2 games should ever be the same. Considering the quality components of the game and the number of cards, this is a fairly affordable game. You can visit the publisher's website for the current suggested retail price. You should also be able to find the game offered online by other sellers. As of 2021, the game and the expansion were still in print and readily available. You don't really need any accessories for this game since it has adequate and secure storage for the components, and it even comes with card sleeves. You would get by just fine without using accessories, but here is an item that may enhance your gaming experience and that you can use with other games. If you are playing Valley of the Kings Premium Edition on a padded card table, you should be able to easily place and pick up cards. However, if you are playing on a dining room or coffee table, you may want to invest in a game mat. They are relatively inexpensive but make card play much easier, and of course you can use the mats for other card games and games that use tiles or dominoes. This concludes our review of Valley of the Kings Premium Edition. If you would like to experience something more exciting than discovering King Tut's tomb, stick around for our disclaimer. Coming up next.